Hello everyone, Reginald Scott here, welcome to the video. I do hope you're well, and as always folks, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with a friend, and comment below. Definitely want your comments today because we are reviewing this ultimate crit bike build from GCN, and what I want to know from you guys is A, do you think their crit build is the ultimate crit build? Would you have done anything differently, and do you agree with my analysis, which is going to be what this video is about today? Please do excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather today. I'll be sucking on cough sweets as we go.
He says he's not dead.
Yes, he is.
I'm not. He isn't.
Well, he will be soon. He's very ill.
I'm getting better.
No, you're not. You'll be stone dead in a moment.
And like yesterday, I didn't even have the energy to get out of bed, to be honest with you. And I thought about going cycling today, but I thought, you know what? I'll probably just make myself worse from whatever virus it is that I have right now. But I'm feeling a bit better today, so I thought, you know, I'd make a little fun video. So that's what we're doing today. We're having a little fun video review of a GCN crit bike build. My last GCN video that I commented on, they actually copyright striked me. But I argued it under fair use, and they actually released the video. So that was awesome, actually. I was really surprised they actually agreed with me that it was fair use. I mean, it was fair use. I was actually not expecting them to be cool about it, but they were. I am reviewing and discussing, for educational purposes, this video. So let's look at their ultimate crit bike build video today.
It's episode 2 of building the ultimate crit bike, a bike which I think strikes the perfect balance between performance and price. In this episode, I'm going to get the bike finished so that it's ready.
Right, so you heard it there. This is a bike where they have got the ultimate balance between performance and price. Is that true? Let's find out. So we're going to fast forward to the end.
This bike build is going to cost you in the region of somewhere between £3,000 and £3,500, euros or dollars, depending on...
Right, £3,000, £3,000 or £3,500 for a crit bike. Yeah, it's not bad. By today's standards, I guess that's not bad. Do I think I could do better? Yes. I definitely could do better, and I think you guys could do better as well. So, first criticism is what they selected was a brand new Cannondale aluminium frame. I totally agree that an aluminium frame is the best choice for crit. Number one, aluminium is very, very stiff. You often get a very, very, very stiff bike when you buy a high-end racing aluminium frame. So I agree with that. And number two, aluminium can take a few knocks. Now, every single crit race I've ever been in, there has been a crash or multiple crashes. I have never been in a crit race where nobody crashed. Never. I've been in a fair few different crit races. I'm not somebody who does crit on a regular basis, but I've done a few, and yeah, somebody always crashes. I'm thinking back now, all the crits I've done, even the last crit I did, there was a crash somewhere in the middle, which I didn't see because they were in a group further behind than me. And then in the sprint finish, I also didn't see the crash, but I saw the photographs later. They were behind at the back of the group. I was actually leading the sprint on the final few hundred meters. Didn't win, unfortunately, but and they were way behind me, and there was just this picture taken of the day, and the bike was just flipped up in the air. Anyway, somebody always crashes during crit. So, hopefully you'll be lucky and you won't be involved in that crash. But if you are and you go down, it's much better to have an alley bike than, say, for example, a really nice carbon bike or a really nice tie bike, simply because you don't want to damage an expensive bike. Aluminium can take the knocks, and it's also cheap to replace. So that if you do end up completely wrecking the frame, you know, it can be replaced. Wait, so I agree with that. However, what I don't agree with is if you are going to do crit, and you're just going to do crit on this bike, there's no reason to buy a brand new frame. Go out and look for a second-hand rim brake aluminium bike. Something by Cannondale is great, or a Specialized Alice Sprint would be another really great choice. Go for the rim brake version. There's several reasons for this. Number one, price. Second-hand bike is obviously going to cost you way less. You're going to get a bunch of components with it that you can either swap out, change, or keep, depending on what the components are. If you just can buy the frame from somebody, that's even better. That means all your additional components are going to be cheaper as well. So, you know, a 105 disc brake group set might cost you around £1,000, but a rim brake version of that same group set is going to cost you around £700 maybe, or less. And you don't have to go for 105. 105 is a great group set. I would recommend 105 if you can get it. But you could also go SRAM Rival or something like that, or be one of the Chinese group sets. You know, something really cheap off AliExpress, probably about £500, maybe less. So definitely go rim brakes, because when are you going to need to use disc brakes in a crit? There isn't any climbing in a crit. I mean, I've never been in a crit that had any significant climbing in it, so there won't be any descending. And if there's no descending, there's really no use to use brakes in the corners. You use your body position, you use your position within the group, you use your pedaling power to control your speed. You don't need brakes. At the very most, you might scrub a little bit of speed with your brakes, but it's mostly unnecessary. So having super powerful disc brakes is not necessary for a crit bike. It's actually a disadvantage, because obviously they're less aero, they're more heavy, and they're harder to maintain, and they're more expensive. So crit bike, if you're building an absolute crit weapon, go for rim brake, go for second-hand frame. Aluminium is good, they got that right. What else can I say? That's basically it.
So at the front of the bike, I've chosen the Vibe Carbon Aero handlebar in a 38cm wide option. Narrow by some people's standards, but for me, I feel like it's beneficial to help my riding position to be more aerodynamic, and being as narrow as it is, it makes it great for squeezing through gaps in a racing situation.
He's picked a 38. Now that does make sense to me. Yes, you do want to be narrow to squeezing through the groups and squeezing through the riders in a crit. Usually the bunches are very tight and very fast, so you do need a narrow bar. However, don't go too narrow, okay? And the reason for that is, I find it's a lot harder to sprint on a super narrow bar, all right? The way that when you pull on the bar, when you're really getting to the power into each one of your leg strokes, basically, as you're pressing on the pedals and you're pulling the opposite direction on your bars, I find if the bar is too narrow, it's, you know, much more narrow than your shoulder width, then it makes it more difficult to get the power down. I have found, personally. So I would recommend go for a bar that matches your shoulders. Okay, so you sort of take a measurement of your shoulders, and then find a bar that fits within that measurement. Not something that goes well within that measurement, that's very, very narrow, just because of comfort for sprinting. I find you'll have a much more easy time and a much more efficient sprint, which is important in a crit, because you need to sprint to catch up with other people in a group, you need to sprint to bridge gaps, and you need to sprint to get away from people or to obviously finish the race. So, yes, narrow bar, good, but don't go too narrow. Also, don't go carbon. Why would you stick a carbon bar on a crit bike? You can now buy, like if you go on Wiggle, are Wiggle still a thing? Have they gone bust completely now, or are they still active? I think they're still active. But you can go buy like the Wiggle own brand stuff. I forget what it's called. But they're like, you know, branded, the Wiggle branded cheapo stuff. And you can get beautifully hydroformed aluminium bars, which are aerodynamic, if that's what you want. It's not something you need, let's put it that way. But if you want an aero bar, go aero aluminium. It'll be cheaper. It'll be just as light. Some of these aero aluminium bars, hydroformed aero aluminium bars now, are incredibly light. And again, with Ali, it can take a knock. So if you do go down, number one, if you break an Ali bar, it's obvious you've broken an Ali bar, right? You'll see that it's bent, or you'll see that it's twisted, or you'll see that it's snapped entirely. With a carbon bar, if you go down on it, sometimes the damage is not obvious. You may have broken strands of carbon fiber within the bar or between the layers of the carbon fiber that won't become apparent until much later, until, unfortunately, you have an accident.
Mono 105 carbon fiber wheels is actually
105 carbon fiber, that's interesting. Now, again, like I said before, you can get yourself much cheaper carbon wheels than this. Do you need carbon wheels for crit? That's a good question. Now, you can use very low profile aluminium wheels for crit. And the advantage that will give you, again, you're not going to be climbing. So, having super lightweight carbon wheels doesn't necessarily matter. But a low profile pair of alley wheels are going to be very stable. So if you get any side winds or anything while you're on the crit, it's not going to affect you at all. And there is a lot to be said for that. And another thing about it is, if you go really low profile alley, they tend to be quite light. And they can actually be lighter than a deep section carbon rim, believe it or not. Light wheels accelerate faster. So when you're in the group and you're sheltered by other riders, aerodynamics doesn't matter that much because you've got a 30% advantage from being around other riders in the group, minimum, okay? So you don't need super aerodynamic carbon rims to provide you an additional advantage once you're in the group. If you're leaving the group, usually it's because you're going for the finish line or you're trying to escape people. And in that moment, acceleration matters. And a low-profile alley rim that's super lightweight is going to accelerate better than a slightly heavier deep-section carbon rim. Now, obviously, there reaches a point where the carbon rim out on its own, if you're on a breakaway or something, is going to give you an advantage aerodynamically if it's deeper. But it swings and roundabouts. What I'm trying to say is you don't need carbon rims for crit. You can win crit on alley rims. The other thing, of course, is alley rims are cheaper, and if you crash, it's a lot better to crash on a pair of aluminium rims than it is on a pair of carbon rims. So, yeah, go second-hand rims and find whatever deal you can get. Sometimes you can pick up carbon rims for as cheap as alley wheels.
Now, at the centre of the wheels, we've got 160mm rotors, front and rear. Tyres are Pirelli P0 races, fitted
160 mil. Did you say 160mm rotors? Is that right? Is that what he said?
the centre of the wheels, we've got 160mm rotors, front and rear.
Yeah, I mean 160mm rotors on a crit bike. Again, what braking are you going to be doing during a crit? Very little. I've done crit races on industrial estates, I've done crit races in car parks, I've done crit races on closed roads around government buildings, I've done crit races in racetracks, go-kart tracks, I've done crit races. You rarely use your brakes, very rare, and you very rarely brake hard. And if you do want to brake hard, you can brake hard on rim brakes. It's not a problem. You do not need to be carrying ginormous pizza cutters around with you. 160, is that 160 millimeters is just too much.
Rear. Tyres are Pirelli P0 races, fitted with Pirelli's TPU thermoplastic inner tubes. Help keep the
Right. He's got TPU inner tubes in there. Oh, he's going to explain why he did that. Hang on.
weight down a little bit. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be travelling with this bike, so I didn't really want the added stress and hassle of having a tubeless setup. Now, when we move down...
Right, that's great. Okay, so, remember I made that video all about tubeless, and I said why I personally wouldn't bother with tubeless, and I said it's a faff. One of my main reasons was price and the amount of faff that there is with tubeless, and he just said it there himself. I mean, they constantly on GCN push tubeless, but he's being honest now, isn't he? He's saying, look, I've got to travel with this bike. I've got to put this bike in and out of my car, and maybe I've got to fly with it. The last thing I want to be doing is bothering with a tubeless setup, because that's the worst situation for getting to a race and something has gone wrong with your tubeless setup. If I've got TPU tubes in there and anything goes wrong, I can just bang another tube in there within a minute or two, right? It's a simple fix. So yes, 100% I would agree, go with the TPU tubes. I can't recommend the Pirelli ones because I've never used them, but I definitely can recommend the Ride Now ones, which I have used. And yeah, that is very sensible. Also, TPU tubes have a lower rolling resistance than normal inner tubes, and in some cases they even have a lower rolling resistance than tubeless setups. Best one to go for is latex, of course, but the TPUs are slightly lighter, and that's really going to cut down on your bike weight as well. And it's off the wheels. Always shed weight off the wheels if you can, because again, lighter wheels are going to accelerate faster. And in a crit race, just like in a car race, like an F1 or something, acceleration matters more than top speed, right? So it's not the car with the greatest top speed that's going to win the race. It's the car that can accelerate to its top speed the fastest, which is going to win the race. Okay.
Arms are 172.5 millimeters long, and then the chainrings are 34.
Right. This is interesting. So his cranks, what was it? What did you say? 172.5, is it? They're quite long. Now, obviously, crank length depends very much on you and your personal bike fit. I'm not going to tell you to go out and get shorter cranks, but in crit, there are sometimes, especially if you're doing it in a car park or a go-kart track or something, there are very tight turns. And I have had guys in front of me that I've been chasing in crits have a pedal strike right in front of me and flip their bikes right in front of me. In one of the last crits, a couple of crits ago, I think it was like the third to last one I did. I was chasing this guy around a go-kart track, and he had a pedal strike on one of the corners. He was trying to escape me. He was pushing it as hard as he could. I was gaining on him. He knew it, and he just decided to take a chance on a corner. He didn't get his foot up, or he was pedaling through the corner, or he didn't get his foot up. I can't remember which, but he struck the tarmac with his pedal and flipped the bike, and I went round him. Thank goodness. But you want to avoid that wherever possible. So having a slightly shorter crank might help with that. You know, it might only be 1 or 2 millimeters, but it could save you. It could save you from getting a pedal strike. Another thing is, pick a frame with a slightly higher bottom bracket. Now, generally speaking, more endurance style frames will have a lower bottom bracket. Okay, and the reason for that is stability. If you lower the bottom bracket, you basically lower the center of mass for the bike. You make the bike more stable in the corners. What you don't want in a crit race is a stable bike, because stable bikes are hard to turn into corners. It makes it difficult, right? So what you want is a slightly unstable bike. You want a bike that turns easily, that wants to basically flop from one side to another at the drop of a hat. Unstable like a jet fighter is unstable. They've designed jet fighters to be unstable so that they turn faster. So that's what you want from your frame. So you want to pick a type of bike frame with a higher bottom bracket. Higher bottom bracket is more unstable, but also a higher bottom bracket is going to have more ground clearance. And so when you lean into those corners at speed, even if you forget to switch your pedals from one side to the other, because you obviously don't want to lean into a corner with your foot down on the side you're leaning in. But if you do make that mistake, or you're pedaling through the corners to get as much speed as possible, higher bottom bracket shell is going to equal less pedal strikes.
Dual chainring crank. Crank arms are 172.5 millimeters long, and then the chainrings are a 34 and a 50. However, I am contemplating on whether I switch that to a 36-52, because as I mentioned, I'm going to go race this bike, and I might find that I actually want some harder gears.
If we move to the
Right, so good point, okay, he's running right now a compact chainring. You don't want to be running a compact chainring on a crit bike. You want as big a chainring as possible, in my opinion. Go for a 53. I mean, I don't know why he's messing around with a 52. Does the new 105 even come in a 53? Possibly not. Maybe that's why he's suggesting a 52. But just go for a 53. Again, you're not going to be mountain climbing on this bike.
Climbing, the world's loneliest sport, where hardship and philosophy go hand in glove. And here, another British expedition attempting to be the first man to successfully climb the north face of the Uxbridge Road.
You probably never, if you're only using it for crit, you'll probably never use the inner chainring. So you might as well take the inner chainring off, take the front derailleur off as well, and just basically go one by. You'll save a load of weight. You'll be more aero. If you're only doing crit, it makes total sense to do that. I'm not recommending you do that, but if you're only going to do crit, why do you need an inner chainring? No climbing. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know what he's messing around at there. I disagree with that one.
rear of the bike, I'm running an 11 to 30 tooth cassette because it offers smaller jumps between the gear ratio.
11 to 30 tooth on a crit bike. Come on. Again, you don't need 1130 on a crit bike. You're not going to be climbing. I would say, all right, let me think. I would say the biggest gear you're probably going to use in a crit is the 16 tooth. Most crit is going to be way lower than that. You're going to be using 11, 10, 12, 13, maybe 14. If you're just warming up or the crit's just getting started, unless there's like a break right from the beginning, like everyone just goes... It depends how long the crit race is. If it's a really short race, then everyone's going to be just absolutely hammering it straight away, straight out the gate. But if it's a longer crit race with a lot more laps, I've done some which have been quite long actually. I've done crit races that are over 100 kilometers. Then yeah, you'll need the lower gears just for basically spinning in the group while everyone sorts themselves out and just eats up some of the distance. But generally speaking, you do not need anything as big as a 30T on your crit bike. If you reduce the size of your cassette, okay, to something like 1125 or 1128, it's all perfectly reasonable. Number one, you reduce the weight. And number two, you have nicer shifts between the gears. Okay, so if you do use some of the bigger gears, there won't be any gaps or jumps with the cassette. So I would say 1125 for a crit bike or 1128 max. You certainly don't need to be going to 1130 or 1132 or 1134 or 1136 or whatever. That would be crazy.
Rather than covering a wider gear range. Now this 105 rear derailleur can handle up to an 11 to 36 to cassette, which is great for those long epic climbs and is open to 36 to...
So he just said, you see the longer derailleur there, dropping out the bottom of the bike. Number one, less aero. Get a shorter rear derailleur. You don't need a long cage derailleur like that gives you the capacity to go to 1136 for a crit bike, because you don't need 1136. He just said it's great for the epic climbs. What epic climbs? This is supposed to be it says in the title of the video, the ultimate crit bike. Why are we building the ultimate crit bike to climb Alpe d'Huez? It doesn't make any sense. It's silly. Stop being silly. This is very silly.
I'm not prepared to pursue my line of inquiry any further, as I think this is getting too silly.
Quite agree, quite agree. Silly, silly, silly.
You don't need a long cage derailleur and 1136 on a crit bike. So get rid of the long cage derailleur, get a short cage derailleur, get 1125. You'll save weight, you'll be more aero, you'll have a better gear range for flat roads, which is what crits are on. Like the most I've ever climbed in a crit is like a slight slope. And you can do it out the saddle. You just get out the saddle and you sprint up. And that's it. And if you were to drop gears and go to an easier climbing gear to get up that slope, by the time you reach the top, the whole group has passed you by. I don't know how many of you have done racing before. A lot of the time you never use your climbing gears, even when you're climbing in a race. You don't have time. You don't have time to shift down. And if you do shift down, all the riders who are just grinding it will pass you. They're just going to sprint up that hill. They are not going to sit around with granny gears spinning like this, spinning up the hill in 1136. Nobody's going to do that. Everyone's going to stay in the top gear on the front chainring, and they'll maybe drop a couple of gears at the rear just to make it a bit easier, and then they're just jamming it. They're just sprinting all the way up. Because they will win. Do have the advantage. Now, it's different if you're in a mountain stage of a race and you climb up a great big mountain. Yeah, then gears are going to be a huge advantage because nobody's sprinting all the way up a mountain. You're going to get a heart attack halfway up if they do that. This is a crit race. Don't mess around with long cage derailleurs and oversized cassettes. Silly. Now, if you're building this bike to do everything, okay, that makes sense. But then it wouldn't be the ultimate crit bike. It would be the ultimate all-round bike, wouldn't it? And
on top of that, we've got a Stealth Pro saddle. This is 142
okay.
millimeters in width. It's a short nose saddle and uses a carbon fiber composite for the base and carbon fiber rails.
Okay. What are you doing? Right. So you don't need a super expensive lightweight saddle on your crit bike. It's a silly thing to do, and I'll tell you why. Just pick a shape that works for you. Now, for me, I like the Arione. That is the saddle that I use. And there are various different price points with the Arione. You can spend like, I don't know, $500 on an Arione, all the way down to like $90 on an Arione. So get the $90 one. Because the $90 one is going to come with metal rails and a very basic plastic shell. And it's going to be perfectly comfortable. It's going to be as comfortable, maybe even more comfortable than the top of the range one, which obviously is going to be much firmer and have less flex to it. Stick that on your crit bike. Why? When you crash, if you crash, I've never crashed in crit, knock on wood. I've never crashed in a crit, but I just upset my computer there. But if you do crash, the two things that are going to come off, well, let's say three things that are going to come off most scathed in a crash on crit is your saddle, your handlebar, and your pedals. Those are the three things that are going to get scuffed up, okay? So if you've dropped $500 on a fancy carbon rail saddle and you crash in crit, best case scenario, you're going to scuff up the side of that saddle real bad. And if you scuff up carbon fiber, it becomes sharp and jagged, and you get little fibrous bits of material coming off, which are very uncomfortable on your legs later on if you get back on the bike. Need to be sanded away. And worst case scenario, you crack one of the rails because it's only carbon. So you'd end up smashing the thing. So no, pick a cheap saddle. Nothing wrong with a cheap saddle.
Of course, if you haven't noticed already, I haven't got any pedals on this bike because at the moment, I'm not sure what I'm going to put on there. The rest of
Yeah, here's a good point. This bike, no pedals. All right. Now, he does a free hub sound check, which we don't care about, or at least I don't. If you want to go hear the free hub sound check, go watch the original video. What I do care about is the final point, which is the weight.
I think I've ticked the box on all that. What we haven't mentioned yet is the weight. Now, my scales are back at GCN Mega Base. So when I get back, I'm going to weigh it and put the price up on screen.
Right. 8.27 kg. Without pedals. 8.27 kg without pedals. And he's got carbon saddle, carbon wheels, carbon fork, carbon handlebar, and carbon bottle cages. And his bike's still coming in at 8.27 kg. That's heavy. I'm sorry, but that's heavy. My steel Chinelli, okay, size, what is it, 55 top tube? So it's medium large or large, depending on which manufacturer you talk to. Has alley wheels, okay, aluminium stem, carbon bar, carbon seat post, just like his, or he has a carbon seat post as well. I have a carbon saddle on mine. I have pedals on my bike, and I have a Ultegra rim brake grip set, and my steel bike comes in at 8 kilos, pretty much on the dot. Maybe ever so slightly less. I think it's around 8 kilos. So why is his aluminium bike so heavy? His aluminium bike should be way less heavy than my steel bike. I think the density of aluminium is like half that of steel. So why is it so heavy? Disc brakes. He's got disc brakes on there. His wheels are heavy. He's got heavy-ish carbon, cheap carbon rims. So you could save a lot of weight on this bike by going second-hand, by going rim brake, getting some nice second-hand rim brake wheels, whether they be carbon or aluminium. You can get them much lighter than what he's probably got. And even though he spent a lot of money on a carbon bar, I'm telling you now, you can probably get alley bars as light, if not lighter than the one he has on his bike right now, even aero ones. So there's a load of weight savings there that you can make. And even if you sacrifice the fancy saddle and put on a heavier metal rail saddle, I think you could easily beat that weight. On an aluminium bike, let me think. My old aluminium bike from the 90s, early 2000s, should I say, is 7.6 kilos. Somewhere around there, I think. So you should be well sub 8 kilo. 8.27 is way, so it's nearly 8.3. That's way too heavy. Why is it so heavy? Now, I know weight doesn't matter that much in a crit race, but acceleration matters. And the more weight you have to move, the harder it is to accelerate. Why carry the weight if you don't have to? I get these comments all the time on my videos when I do a lightweight video about some lightweight product on my lightweight bike. People always say, oh, just go to the toilet, before the race.
I've been a Frenchman all my life, and I've only once been to the lavatory.
I would rather have a bike that weighs 500 grams less than your bike and drop 300 grams in poop before I ride and I'll be better off than you are. Like, you're still carrying the 500 grams on your bike. You know what I mean? And we both pooped. Like, there's only so much you can do to your human body, and then you got to do it to your bike, you see? So why would you ride an 8.3 kilo bike that he hasn't even put pedals on yet? You're looking at 8.5 kilos by the time he gets pedals on it. Your bike, I'm telling you now, your second-hand rim brake aluminium specialized Alice crit bike is going to be sub 8 kg. It's going to be 7.6, 7.5, somewhere around there. That's what I'm estimating. Okay, it's honestly, it's a joke to have such a heavy bike like that. That's silly. Don't be silly. This is not the ultimate crit bike, is the point I'm trying to make.
Well, there we go. Bike build complete. And I genuinely do feel like I've built the ultimate crit bike. It's fast, it's robust, it's agile, and let's face it, relatively easy going on the wallet compared to many.
Right, so he thinks he's built the ultimate crit bike. Is he right? So let me know in the comments below. Let's collectively suggest what the ultimate crit bike would be. Maybe you already even own the ultimate crit bike. So let us know. Maybe send me a picture. All right, folks. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Just a bit of entertainment today. And whatever you are doing, whenever you are riding, do stay safe. And I shall see you in the next video. Bye-bye.